Welcome to Inside the Realtor Studio, interviews with industry leaders and professionals in real estate. The Tucson Association of Realtors turns 100 this year, 1921 to 2021. We honor our history by conducting interviews of the past presidents of the Tucson Association of Realtors. We'll learn a bit of history by talking to the experts themselves. Today's past president from 1992 is Bill Arnold. Bill has been licensed since 1978 and is the broker owner of William G. Arnold Limited. Bill practices in the area of suburban and rural land in southern Arizona. He specializes in ranches, federal land exchanges, as well as water and mineral rights and land use consulting. Bill has chaired multiple committees at the state and national levels, as well as having served multiple terms on the board of directors at all three levels of the association, local, state, and national. And of course, was elected president of the Tucson Association of Realtors in 1992. Bill has also served on the Pima County Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Health, and Board of Adjustment. Bill's married to Diane Arnold and is blessed with 3 children and 4 grandchildren. And when he isn't working or with the family, you'll find him volunteering with the Park Service as a backcountry ranger in Saguaro National Park or working as a wilderness ranger for the U.S. Forest Service in Northwest Montana. Let's give a warm Inside the Realtor Studio welcome to Bill Arnold. Welcome, Bill.
Steve, is very nice.
You betcha. Could have practically written it yourself. Let's begin our trip today with a bit about real estate before you were president. So where did you first hang your license?
I was first licensed with Century 21 Alfano and Associates. It was a small firm at Wrightstown and Pantano.
Oh, okay.
That's where I met my wife.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How about that? And so how long did you stay there for much time, or
Just
establish your?
Yeah, just a couple of years. It was a residentially focused brokerage firm, and I very quickly determined that wasn't where my heart was. So I wanted to do land, and they weren't real excited about that. So I migrated from there.
All right. And so during your real estate career, have you worked alone, or have you ever worked in a partnership or with a team or anything like that?
I went from the Century 21 franchise to Sullivan and Associates. Bill Sullivan was the broker. He's also past president, 1972, I think, and worked with him for 10 years. And he really was my mentor in the land business, taught me the business. And then I went from there to Genesis Real Estate and Development. And that was Leonard Reichart was the broker. It was just he and I for several years. Other folks ended up coming on, but I worked with him for about 10 years. And then he was moving to Show Low, and I opened up my own shop right next door. Yeah.
So when you first started in the business, what was the technology of the day?
Oh, it was... Well, at the time, it was really revolutionary, and it was awesome. But compared to today, it was a joke. The computer system, if you will, was a dial-up modem, and you literally used the dial-up phone. You rang the phone number, and then you would put the handset into a coupler, and it would then set up the communication protocol, and you could then print on a thermal printer. It was terrible. And we had the book, of course, it was right about the time the book started. They had just a few years before that just been doing loose leaf filing, so those would get printed by a different company, a multiple listing service that was then a separate company. They would print the listings on sheets and deliver those to the offices, and then you literally had your secretary or whoever, some office help, that would manually put those one page at a time in your three ring binders, and that was the system. Then it went to books. Then the books went away, and we went all electronic.
How often were they delivering those?
I think it was every day. I want to say it was every day, or maybe it was once a week. That was right before I started, so I didn't have to deal with that. But that was right there.
That's amazing when you think about it. just the logistics alone
Yeah,
of trying to get all that out.
yeah, it's
So
great.
let's shift over to your presidency.
Mhm.
And you were in office in 1992. What building were we operating out of?
That was 1622 North Swan.
Okay. Can you describe the building a bit for people who aren't familiar with that?
Um, Past President Sullivan was the general contractor of that building.
Oh,
And he was also the brains behind how that building was financed. We can talk about that maybe later, but it was pretty unique. The building is on the east side of Swan, between Speedway and, um, I want to say, what is that? Not Fort Lowell, but what's the halfway between Speedway and Grand?
Pima?
Yeah, Pima. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's halfway. So it's about halfway between Pima and Speedway, east side. One story, and a kind of a Santa Fe Adobe style. It was frame and stucco, but it was architecturally designed that way. You walk in the front door, and it was red brick uh, flooring, literally red bricks. And it was a main hall, and the TAR offices, or Tucson, it was TBR then, Tucson Board of Realtors, um, uh, was on your left, and the multiple listing service was on your right. Um, yeah, it wasn't a very big facility compared to what we have now. Is probably, oh, maybe a third the size of the building. The boardroom also served as the classroom. Um, Again, compared to the classroom we have now, probably a quarter of the size, maybe even less.
But it was a brand new building for us, right?
It was brand new shortly before I was, well, before I was president. It was probably it was built in the 80s. I want to say in the 80s. Yeah.
Okay. And who was your CEO?
Her name was Beverly Fall. She had been on staff. The previous CEO was Greg Millward. He left right before I went into office. Beverly was hired. Um, we were at that time. It was a. I mean, there were some real challenges going on, and I think it was pretty clear that it was going to be difficult for us to actually hire someone to come in from the outside because of how tenuous the financial position was.
Mm.
Beverly was all charged up at the opportunity to step into that, and she ended up being a really good fit, a good pick. And she'd been there for several years anyway, and she was a very smart, tough go-getter, and yeah, she ended up being great.
Was there much other staff there besides her?
I want to say there were 6 or 8 other folks. Patty Spike, we called her Spike Richardson, was there. You probably remember Patty because she was around for quite a while. She ended up being our government affairs coordinator for, I think, about a decade later. Um, so those two were kind of a pair, and pretty tough to get around. They knew what they were doing, and when they staked out a position, they stuck to their guns. They were not intimidated by leadership. They stated what they thought was the right thing to do, and then of course leadership made the decisions. But and they then followed along. But they were really good about, and they weren't afraid to take controversial positions or tough positions. They were really pretty unique in that regard. So yeah, we had, I think, I want to say 4 or 5 on the TAR side and 3 or 4 on the MLS side. So it was relatively small compared to what we have now. Yeah, relatively small.
You mentioned the financial situation, and this was 1992 when you were president, and I purchased my home and moved to Tucson in 1991. So I know that there had been several years prior that I think with IBM leaving and everything else had been a downturn for the market, correct?
Oh, yeah, the IBM departure, plus we were still in the tail end of the effects of the 1986 Tax Act. And I don't know whether you got in the business right away or not, but at the time, people were referring to that recession as the worst recession since the Great Depression. And of
Wow.
course, compared to what happened in 2008, it was a joke. But at the time, it was viewed as pretty bad. And 1992 is the turning point where we bottomed out and started heading up, and that was good news. That was good news. But it was tough for that reason, and we also, um, several years before had acquired this new technology for our MLS. It's called the Dator system, and it was a disaster right from the get-go. And we kept trying to work with the vendor to fix it and make it work, and it almost bankrupted us. It was a the year before I was president was the turning point, and yeah, under Vicky Cox Golder's leadership, and the team that was put together, we were there all the time, making sure that that operation continued, and implemented policies and procedures to help the profitability. And as a result of that, well, we can talk about that later. But it was a tough time, and we barely made it through. We did.
And all the time you're dealing, I imagine, with membership levels that were dropping because of the business climate.
Correct. Yeah, and the commercial market was bad. It was not a great time. Um, at least through the first half of the year or so, and then things started getting better, and from there we had almost a decade of pretty solid growth, and really
Yeah.
pretty good real estate market.
So who got you involved in association leadership?
Bill Sullivan, my mentor, he had been a past president, was still very active. He was active for probably just about another decade, through about maybe the late 90s anyway, or maybe, yeah, somewhere in the early 90s. And yeah, he was a very dedicated realtor. He was very involved in the local association, had been for several decades. His wife Jackie as well, um, and through her support of Bill. And he was very involved at the AAR level, not so much at the NAR level, but at the state and local level. He was everywhere, and everybody knew him.
Hmm.
He was a force to reckon with.
So during your term, what do you think your biggest challenge was?
Well, the financial situation was the most difficult piece. We our one of our concerns was, maintaining staff, not losing staff. So, hiring from within, when we hired Beverly, was a smart move in that regard. We knew she was motivated. She wanted to prove herself. She wanted it. She wanted that job, and she wanted it to be successful, and build her resume. And she did that. And but yeah, just the financial situation was the biggest challenge that we had. Mm.
And what was your biggest accomplishment, do you think?
I alluded earlier to the unique financing on that building that Bill Sullivan was responsible for, and I remember talking to him about it. What they had done was they had sold bonds to the members, so the members
Mm.
financed that building, and you could buy a bond. I think the smallest amount, it was either $100 or $1,000. I don't remember which, but there were hundreds and hundreds of these obligations that TAR had. So each time there was an interest payment due, somebody had to do all that calculating, and someone had to print all those checks and sign all those checks and deliver all. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare, as opposed to writing a mortgage payment, right?
Yeah.
So we owed, I don't remember what the numbers were. We owed still a substantial amount, but I made it my goal at the beginning of the year to pay that building off. And we structured the finances such that if things went the way we expected them to go, that we'd have the funds to do that. And that worked out as predicted. And I was very pleased to be the president when that was paid off. And we actually we had a, we had a mortgage burning ceremony at one of our membership meetings at the time. So it was, I think I've got some pictures of that. So it was quite fun. Past President Wright was there, and past President Grammond was there, and I believe Vicky Cox Golder was. I mean, there's quite a few of the folks that you've
Oh,
been in.
sure.
Sure.
So many people had an investment in it at that point.
Yep.
And in 2020, we've done it again. I mean, Billy was able to get the building paid off. Sadly, because of COVID, we couldn't do a mortgage burning ceremony. So,
Right. No, it's one of those things. I called him when I heard that was done. He and I had actually talked about that 3 or 4 years ago, and I visited with him about it. Well, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And that's the kind of thing that most people won't recognize. They won't see the benefit of it, but the fact that TAR doesn't have a 5-digit mortgage payment every month to make, free resources for all kinds of other benefits for the membership going forward. What he did was huge. What the board did was huge, and I applaud his leadership.
And a little gutsy because they weren't, really sure if they should stretch their neck, especially with what's been going on in this year, but they did it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
very proud of him. Good job.
So tell us a little bit about your involvement at AAR and NAR levels and how you first branched out into that and where it all led you.
Uh, in '92, I think my only role at AAR was as the liaison to the then real estate commissioner. I was not involved at all at the NAR level. I didn't start there until '93. And in '93, I got involved in, it's called the Land Use Property Rights and Environment Committee now, the predecessor to that. And um, After that, got involved in the board of directors, and I've chaired several committees there, and I'm still on committees there. I'm serving on land use, property rights, and environment this year, as a matter of fact. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's where the regulatory rubber meets the road, and it's a great place to go.
You spent a lot of time there and you've been so sharing with the membership in that with what you've learned and what we need to know, as we move forward. So it's been beneficial, I think, for both you and for the membership as well.
It's I can remember Bill Sullivan talking to me before I was involved about how important it is to um, pay back to serve the community that you benefit from. And it took me a while, and I was a young man. I was in my early 20s. It took me a while to get my feet under me to where I was, financially comfortable enough to start investing time that wasn't making me money. Um, but once I got involved in the organization and I saw how it worked, and I started to recognize how beneficial it is and how important it is to the industry for us to exist. Just the fact that we have a multiple listing service that creates a level playing field is just a huge advantage, and we get to set the parameters of that for the most part. Um, Serving the membership it has been hugely beneficial to me. I know that I have profited from it, both personally and professionally. And I know that I believe that the membership has benefited as a result as well. So there's a great synergy there, and I would encourage anyone who's considering it to find a place to fit in the organization and go do it.
It's interesting conversation with many past presidents along the way, not during this interview, but as I was becoming president. I think it was Tom Sloyan that took me aside and said, everyone's going to tell you that your business is going to go in the hamper. He goes, it's not true. And it certainly wasn't. It boomed during that period of time. So I guess it's the old saying, give a busy person more to do and they'll do it. So.
I think that's exactly right. In 1992, when I was president, that was my best year ever up to that point. Yep.
Let's see. Yeah.
I remember speaking with past President Griswold, who recently passed away, about his term in '69. He said the same thing.
Let's see.
And
Yeah.
others as well.
Well, any other thoughts about your year while you were as president, or about leadership, or anything along those lines?
What I'd like to do is thank you, Steve, for what you're doing. This is a great service to the membership. I hope folks watch these videos, learn something, get motivated by it, and plug in. And it's through your leadership that this is made possible. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you so much. So we end our interviews with 7 quick questions, and I'm hoping for 7 quick answers.
Hmm.
What's your favorite word?
Word?
Mhm.
Inspiration.
Okay. What's your least favorite word?
Hate.
Okay. What turns you on?
Hiking.
Okay. And what turns you off?
Arguing.
Okay. And what profession other than real estate would you have liked to have attempted?
My dream as a young man was to be a forest ranger, and as an aging man, I'm actually, in a way, living that dream.
Yeah, that's great. And is there a profession out there you're super glad you didn't try?
Hmm. Um, yeah, the guy who cleans out the septic tanks. I don't think I'd want to do that.
You have to whistle while you do that. Anyway,
Yeah.
in closing, if you could do a shout out to anyone living or not in the real estate community, who would it be and why?
Well, that's actually probably a pretty long list, but the name that just leaps to mind is Vicky Golder. Her commitment to the organization has been phenomenal. Um, she took away from her business for many years and served us at the national level as a National Association of Realtors president. Um, eh, but the list is long. James Tegas, he's the paternal figurehead of the organization. I mean, there's a long list of folks. I could sit
That's okay.
and go out.
Yeah, and Vicky, people don't realize that Vicky did that not only the time away, but it was a very challenging period for her.
Yes, it was.
So it's amazing what she gave us.
Mm.
Well, that concludes our interview. I just want to say thank you so much. Anything you want to add at the end?
Just a big thank you, Steve. Yeah.
All right, great.